Some people look independent because they trust themselves. Others look independent because somewhere along the way, trusting anyone else started to feel dangerous. They solve problems before anyone notices. They rarely ask for help. They prepare for what might go wrong, stay calm when everyone else is overwhelmed, and feel strangely uncomfortable when someone says, "Let me take care of this." From the outside, it looks like strength, but sometimes that strength was built from a quieter lesson. Help may not come when you need it. Worse, needing it may leave you disappointed, exposed, or powerless. So you learn to move first, think ahead, carry more, and depend on less. And eventually one rule starts running beneath everything. If something needs to be handled, I have to handle it myself. That rule can become so familiar that years later, you no longer experience it as a rule at all. It just feels like who you are. And this is important. Independence itself is not the problem. Being capable, prepared, and self-sufficient can be genuinely healthy. The question is what happens when those qualities were built around an old expectation that support might be unavailable, inconsistent, overwhelmed, or simply unreliable. A child does not need to be deliberately neglected to learn this. Sometimes the adults around them are loving but stressed. Sometimes help arrives unpredictably. Sometimes asking creates tension, disappointment, or more work. So the child adapts. They expect less. They handle more. And with enough repetition, self-reliance stops feeling like a strategy and starts feeling like personality. In this documentary, we will look at 7 everyday habits that can reveal that deeper expectation and the hidden emotional cost beneath traits people often admire. The first habit begins quietly. You stop wondering whether someone will help because eventually you stop asking. The first sign is often so ordinary that nobody sees it as a sign at all. Habit 1. They rarely ask for help. When something goes wrong, their first instinct is usually not, "Who can help me?" It is, "How do I fix this myself?" They research. They improvise. They stay up later. They take on more than they should. Even when support is available, asking for it can somehow feel more stressful than simply carrying the problem alone. Because asking introduces uncertainty. Will the person actually help? Will they forget? Will you have to explain yourself repeatedly? Will you feel like a burden for needing something in the first place? So doing it alone feels cleaner, more predictable. And that leads directly to habit 2. They prepare for problems before anyone else notices them. They remember the details everyone else forgets. They think 3 steps ahead. They bring backups, anticipate delays, notice what might go wrong, and quietly make sure there is already a solution waiting. People may call this organized, responsible, even impressive, and sometimes it is. But beneath that competence can be a deeper form of control. If you can prevent the problem, you never have to experience the vulnerability of needing someone to rescue you from it. Preparation becomes emotional insurance. You are not only planning for what might happen, you are protecting yourself from having to depend on someone if it does. That is why extreme competence can coexist with a private difficulty trusting that another person will reliably step in. And once this system feels normal, it does not stay limited to practical problems. It begins shaping what you do with your feelings and what happens when relationships require you to need someone. Once you become used to handling practical problems alone, something more subtle can happen. You start handling your emotions the same way. Habit 3. You minimize your own problems. Something hurts, overwhelms you, or quietly exhausts you, and your first response is often to reduce it. It's fine. It's not that serious. I'll deal with it. Sometimes you say those words before you have even asked yourself whether you are actually okay. This can look like emotional maturity, and sometimes it is resilience. But it can also be a way of making your needs small enough that nobody has to respond to them. Because if you admit that something is difficult, you create the possibility of needing comfort. And needing comfort can feel uncertain. That is where habit 4 begins. You become the person everyone else depends on. You notice when someone is struggling. You remember what they need. You give advice, solve problems, listen carefully, and often become the calm person people call during a crisis. Giving support feels natural. Receiving it may not. There is control in being useful. You know your role. You know what is expected. You can be close to people without exposing the parts of yourself that feel less certain. So you may understand another person's emotions within minutes while struggling to answer a simple question about your own. What do you need right now? None of this means something is wrong with you. These habits often worked. They reduced disappointment, created stability, and helped you function when depending on other people felt complicated. But they also create a painful paradox. The better you become at carrying everything, the more convincing your strength looks from the outside. And the more convincing it looks, the less likely anyone is to realize that you might want someone to carry something for you. Eventually, even when care finally arrives, receiving it can feel strangely unfamiliar. And this is where the pattern becomes harder to recognize, because the problem is no longer whether help exists. Sometimes, reliable people are finally there, but receiving from them can still feel uncomfortable. Habit 5. They struggle to be taken care of. Someone offers to help, and instead of relief, there may be hesitation. You wonder whether you are asking too much. You feel guilty accepting. You immediately think about how to repay them. Or part of you becomes suspicious, waiting for the favor to create an obligation later. So even kindness can activate the urge to regain balance and control. Because accepting care means temporarily entering a position you spent years learning to avoid, needing something from another person. That same pattern appears in habit 6. They withdraw when life becomes difficult. Many people assume hardship naturally brings us closer to others. But for someone shaped by extreme self-reliance, stress can do the opposite. They become quieter. They stop replying. They work longer hours. They disappear into problem-solving mode and return only after they have made the situation manageable again. Not necessarily because they do not trust or love the people around them, but because vulnerability may feel easiest to tolerate in private. Across all 6 habits, the same emotional logic keeps appearing. Do not place yourself in a position where your stability depends on someone else showing up. Handle it first. Reduce the need. Regain control. And over time, this stops feeling like protection. It starts feeling like identity. That is where the final habit becomes the most revealing of all. And beneath all of these patterns is perhaps the most important one. Habit 7. They automatically assume responsibility. When something goes wrong, their mind immediately moves toward action. What do I need to fix? What did I miss? What should I organize, prevent, absorb, or take care of now? Even when the situation is not entirely theirs to carry, responsibility can feel almost automatic. From the outside, this looks admirable. They are dependable, competent, the person who gets things done. But underneath that instinct may be a much older expectation. Not simply, I am responsible, but if I do not take responsibility, I cannot be sure anyone else will. And when that expectation repeats for long enough, capability becomes more than behavior. It becomes identity. You become the independent one, the useful one, the person who does not need much, the person who stays prepared, keeps emotions controlled, and makes life easier for everyone else. Those qualities may even become connected to your sense of safety and, eventually, your sense of worth. Seen this way, the 7 habits are not separate personality traits. They are different expressions of the same adaptation: reduce dependence, maintain control, and protect yourself from the uncertainty of needing someone. But adaptations have one strange feature. They can survive long after the environment that created them has changed. And that raises a different question. What does strength look like when you no longer have to carry everything alone? Maybe the goal was never to become less independent. Maybe it is to finally have a choice. Because learning that help was unreliable can make you extraordinarily capable. It can teach you to anticipate, adapt, endure, and keep moving when nobody else seems prepared. But adulthood offers something childhood often could not: the ability to evaluate people individually instead of assuming every relationship will repeat the same pattern. You can still solve things alone because you want to, not because needing someone feels dangerous. You can remain competent and still accept appropriate support. You can be dependable without carrying every responsibility. And receiving care does not erase the strength that helped you survive without it. Sometimes the deepest change is simply realizing that an old strategy is no longer the only available option. What once protected you does not have to permanently define you. So think about the 7 habits we explored. Which one felt most familiar? And when you look closely, does it feel like genuine preference, learned protection, or perhaps a little of both?